Welcome to our channel. I'm Jill, my partner is Charles, and as many of you know, we are building a batch box style rocket mass heater in our off-grid yurt. And it feels like we have been working on this project forever. It's been a year and a half since Charles first put together the batch box burn chamber. Even now, we have other projects that are competing with this one for time and attention. Like the covered porch, we also want to finish before winter. So Charles has been getting that project off the ground while we're waiting for each layer of mud on the mass to dry. That's a lot of saws you got here, Charles.
Used every one of them.
To take apart our deck?
Taking it apart, just cutting a hole in it.
Good morning. We are slowly trying to perfect our top coat of clay. So I'll show you what happened to the first two experimental batches. The first one was not only pretty lumpy, but it cracked like crazy. The second batch, which Charles measured out the ratios a little bit better the other day, and we worked harder to get the lumps out of it, that one is cracking a lot less and it's looking a bit smoother. So we're getting there slowly but surely. And today I'm going to sit down and try to grind up the clay until it is so fine that there are no lumps in it at all. This is going to be, I think, very effective, but ridiculously time consuming. I'm going to use a mortar and pestle. We'll see how far I can get on it. Meanwhile, Charles has been marking all of the places that he needs to put footings and piers to support the new deck, and also the covered porch, the supports for which will go through the existing deck. So he's been putting holes in our deck, but soon we will be very happy to have a covered porch in front of our doorway, especially in time for the winter when the snow comes. This morning I found Charles ruminating under the deck about how to dig holes for the footings in the crawl space where he can't even stand up. It's the middle of September, and it's been almost 2 weeks since we last put any mud on the rocket mass heater. And that's because we're waiting for the cob to dry before we can add the top coat. We've read that it's important for the mud to dry slowly to minimize cracking, but I think that advice is for people who live in much drier climates. We seem to have the opposite problem. We actually had a bit of mold growing on the bits of straw sticking out of the bench. So I spritzed that with vinegar, and we started running a dehumidifier all the time. And we set the mini split on AC during the day and recirculating fan at night. So that does seem to be working, but it will be another day or so before we can add the next layer. So we've been chipping away at the clay preparation, grinding it and measuring out 1 part clay to 3 parts fine sand for each bucket. How's your new method working, Charles?
Pretty good, I think. Except when you get rocks in it.
As it turned out, both grinding methods worked well. but both were slower than, well, dirt. So we just kept measuring out more buckets of dry materials and stockpiling those until we could finally focus on adding water and mixing it up and getting a layer on the bench. And Charles kept chipping away, literally, at the other project, making the footings for the piers that will support the deck and also the roof that will go over it. The wheelbarrow has been repurposed for mixing concrete. So the clay has been evicted from the wheelbarrow, and I will be measuring out another batch or two of mud for Charles to mix at a later date. And he's going to be pouring the footings for the deck extension.
I just finished pouring 8 footings. There will be 8 posts set for our covered porch.
Well, those concrete footings dried a lot faster than the mud on the bench. So Charles used a laser level to measure how tall each post will need to be. And then he balanced a tiny level on the measuring tape and dangled a plumb bob to mark the spot where each metal anchor would go.
That's pretty darn close. That's good. Okay.
Got it. The experiment continues, and the goal for today is to perfect the ratio of water to sand and clay in the mix, and also to get the barrel on top of the rocket mass heater once and for all, get it cemented into place. So the inside under where the barrel will go is the safest place to apply our next coating of mud. It looks like it will take 2 parts water for every 3 parts clay and 6 parts sand. Hello, Jill from the future here. I'm happy to say that we did achieve our goals that day. Charles tested out the carefully prepared mixes of mud inside the area where the gases from the fire will ignite to make the stove burn more cleanly and efficiently. And then we finally got the barrel into place. And now the rocket mass heater is actually starting to look like a rocket mass heater. Best of all, when the new coat of clay dried, it was working quite well, so we could just make more of that to cover the rest of the bench. Since I'm here from the future, I know this episode contains footage over pretty much the entire month of September. And if it seems like we had a lot of wildlife on the cameras this September, we sure did. These are just the highlights, but we've got 3 trail cameras on the property, and we really did have coyotes sniffing around the same spots where raccoons or foxes had come through just a few hours earlier. And it took 2 years to get any decent video of a bobcat, but if our life up here has taught us anything, it's that patience and persistence will be rewarded. Now our backyard is bobcat central. We thought we had one bobcat coming through regularly, but then this cat squatted on the hill just below the yurt, came to the top of the hill, and just a few hours later, the same spot was visited by, we assume, a different animal. How cool is that? Speaking of patience and persistence, I had hoped this episode would contain some kind of closure on the rocket mass heater project. But instead, I'm going to go ahead and get this video out the first Saturday of the month, like I promised. So, while Charles is busy here, covering up the last unsightly bits of structural mud with straw sticking out, I'll go ahead and share a few life updates that we can expand on in future episodes. First, we're trying to get the radiant floor heating tubes filled up with fluid, and that has proven to be more difficult than we'd hoped. Second, I've accepted a year-long full-time opportunity at a local nature center, and I'm super excited about getting more involved with the community. But don't worry, I love making videos, so I'll keep documenting our progress on the home build. And I'll try to put out a video on the first Saturday of each month. We'll see how that goes. So here's what the mud bench looks like now. It's a little rough on purpose, so the smoother top coat will stick to it. But first, Charles is planning to cover the heat shield behind it with a light gray lime plaster. What are you doing in there?
Who's your friend, Charles?
Mr. Stick.
This was supposed to be an action shot, Mr. Stick.